Hello, welcome to my channel, and I'm going to be breaking down how I made my remix of Chasing Status, Baddadan.
Baddadan, baddadan, baddadan.
So this remix came out earlier this year on Hood Politics, and it's a tech house version of Chasing Status, Baddadan. Obviously, Chasing Status, Baddadan is probably now one of the biggest drum and bass tracks ever. Probably the most played club track last year. It was literally everywhere. And I wanted a version to play in my sets. I'd already heard a few people attempt to turn it into a house track, and as typically when you slow down drum and bass music into house, it can sound a bit off. It can sound a bit slow, especially if you use the same melody that drum and bass tracks had on the original track. So I wanted to make a version that I could play, and obviously the original is such a banger as well. It's going to be quite tough to make anything that hits in the same way. So I wanted to make something where I can imagine playing it sort of as a sort of groover in my set, and it all builds up towards the vocal, as you would have heard. So I'm going to break down how I approached making this. I'm not going to go through all of the parts, for example, on the drums and all the technical side, because otherwise this video will go on for quite a long time. But I really want to talk about some of the elements where I've used them in an original way, or how I've sort of processed them to cut them up and to fit into this track, to fit the groove. And I'll start by just going from the beginning and talk about the elements as they come in. What I'm going to talk about is, obviously, I've turned the vocal throughout into sort of a pad slash lead. And to do that, I've used various different ways of processing it. So the first one that comes in is a sort of what I'll call like a tension pad, something that really gives a bit of texture to the track, and it helps identify the track from the get-go. So you can hear that's sort of on a 16th rhythm, and it's filtering in with an EQ as the track comes in. So to make the intro pad, I took this from the intro of the track, which is now looping over, but that sort of plays at the start of the track before the vocal or the bass comes in. Taking that, and to make the pad, I would have put a huge reverb onto the track, which you can do yourself, and it ends up sounding like this once you apply a bit of processing here. So if you take that down, you can just get the transient, and this is the transient of the reverb. So it's creating an envelope for the sound for it. So that's the first element that comes in. Second element comes in, this is again the intro pad, but I have cut it up. Done this again with the same trick. So using the transients, you see if I play that. And I've had it with the groove ball, it's on the swing 64 setting, so that's sort of moved all the transients around, so you get that really choppy effect. And they then come in together. So they're both using the swing, the new swing, the house swing, and that sets the background pad texture. Let's move on to the kick and the bass. So the bass is actually the vocal from Flowdown run into an acid pattern generator. I made a video which I can link on exactly how I did it using the step sequencer. But I want to talk more about, okay, you can use other stuff that is in for a bass line if you know how to process it. So more on the processing here. You can see the sort of really weighty low end. Cut out all the rumble. I've added saturation to sort of beef up the sound. Really compressed it because it's bass. I don't want the dynamics that a vocal normally has. Sort of a lot of EQ to shape it, and some sidechain there. I think the big thing was that I actually took 2 R basses, and I think I have it. I don't know if I have it now. It's all bounced down to audio, which again, I know when you're working like this, I bounce down to audio to make sure the file is consistent. And sometimes, you know, if you work with unprocessed audio and you put loads of plugins on it, you can sort of get this inconsistency that you don't want, especially with bass. But what I did is, and I can sort of recreate it, is this track is in F. So if I added 2 R basses, one would have been around 48 hertz for the sub fundamental, which I'll put that down there. Right, you see it's really that it's got even added a crazy amount of sub bass there. And then I added a second one to hit the sort of fundamental above it. So you want to hit the second or third fundamental, which will normally be between somewhere like 80 to 120 hertz, depending on what note it is. And for this one, it's about 96. So there you go. That's a sort of you get two really resonant frequencies coming through. And if I take those off, you can see how it makes a difference. So you can use that to make a bass nearly out of anything, as long as you get the right resonant frequencies. Other than that, just a lot of EQ to control it and some saturation. And that's how you get a bass line using a vocal. On this track, obviously you can tell I was being a little bit more experimental with using the vocals for pads. I've used the vocal for bass. And with this sort of really, the drum mix, I don't normally mix it into the kick, but I felt like I really wanted to sort of squash them together, take a little bit of the dynamics out of it and make it a bit more consistent. And that's how I did it, with clipping it between the kick and the clap. The kick in this track, I again processed it. I normally wouldn't put any processing onto kicks if I can get away with it, maybe just saturation to beef it up. On this, I've got some saturation and compression from Kick Tweak, just the second preset turned up a bit. EQ to sort of shape it. Taking the transient out with a transient designer here, just backed off on the attack. Let's have a look at the EQ. EQ is all pushing everything to the focus towards the sub, taking that from 100. R bass, again, this is playing the fundamental of the kick. I've done all of that because the way I was picturing it is like the basses and the kick are like a puzzle. And I haven't used a synthesized bass, so I don't have a sub bass. So I want the kick to be the big sub bass, very broomy in the bottom. So I've scooped out the sort of bass frequencies, pushed it towards the sub, and then I've pushed it into R bass. So you have all the sub coming from the kick, and then the bass sits on top of it, and that's how it grooves together. So if I just solo them together, you sort of get that feeling that the kick is really what's doing a lot of the punching, and then the bass sort of offers a bit of groove to the track. On the drums, honestly, most of the processing here is saturation and compression, so I just got solo the group, a lot of high in there. So that's the full groove. It's basically just your classic 16th emphasized groove for tech house. Nothing crazy, quite a few loops there. And as I said, I really wanted to sort of a rough sound, so my chain, as I thought about it, that is for automation, is first of all started off with some clipping, soft clippings, and that's to narrow the peaks, the start, before going into 2 lots of saturation. You got tube saturation, pushing the triode into the tube, and then the tape saturation with a high amount of glue compression. That's then gone into a compressor. So the way I've said it is I've narrowed the dynamics, then saturation narrows the dynamics even further, and then compress it together, so you get a really sort of consistent sound. And you can see there I've had, what's that, about 2 to 3 dBs affecting the drums. Added on a bit of high end, I'm sure here. Barely anything, 0.5, I was probably messing around with that. That's automation, and then again clipping it to make sure no transients are sort of pushing through, making the track harsh. So it just crashed. I basically going to run through now just the last remaining elements and how some thoughts on the arranging the track. So we'll go straight into it. I think the last element I need to show is the wubs, which come in on the drops. Come in. There we go, yeah. They are FM synths. I've done some random layering, pretty much because I've added some different phase effects. There's two oscillators, up an octave and a 7th, so a major 5th. Then I've actually got the level in of this a little bit. So normally you would take the level down of Serum. If you have a look at the amplitude curve of the filter, you can see that I've added a bit of attack, which is what gives it that wub sound. And that means when I play the short notes, you can see here, I've got 4 short notes. you get that wub sound compared to the long notes. So long notes and then wubs, and that's just because the curve kicks in quicker. Moving on to the rest of the arrangement from the second part of the track. Let's have a listen here. So back to the pad effects. The pad effects come in. They start building. We've got the one that's from the first build and the intro of the original track. Got Shepherd's Tone. The wine synth carries on going. There's a tension sort of pad, sort of synth I've added really quietly in the background. We've got this wee vocal coming in. Yeah, all building. Yeah, I've added Fred Again Rumble in the background, just because why not. Got clap roll. More effects, everything's building. This is the first time that the flow down vocal comes in. That's what you get when you add it all together. So the whole track builds towards this one moment. Everyone knows that vocal, his voice is so deep, and I've got it fairly loud. And the wubs. That goes into the full track, got the full groove. I'm going to say the whole track idea is built around this section and the last build up into the last drop. But top vocal comes back in, but only for half the phrase it did at the start. A lot of little fills. Go into sort of the B section, sort of now where DJs will start mixing the track out. So taking the vocal back out again. Kept the groove quite energetic just in case they kept the track going. You see, just a nod to the original vocal. Switched up the pad. You can see I've got probably 3 or 4 variations of how I've used the pad. And that's just to keep interest in the track. And then we're back to the outro, which that's in the intro, it's in the outro. The drum groove you can see is calmed down. I've taken out quite a lot of elements. The DJs really will be layering on top by this point, building up towards near the end. Everything's fading. You've got the most basic drums, bass, and this is the intro drums. A little bit of bass still. Obviously DJs can filter and edit stuff, so it's such a percussive bass line. There we go, and the low end is taken out. So that's the arrangement of the track. With these kind of tracks, I know that they are definitely for the dance floor, so you can see it's sort of really basic. Here's your intro. First drop is where I expected DJs to play it. It goes straight into the vocal and a bit of a groove, and then it builds to the main part of the track. So, whole idea was about pulling that together, making sure the right tension was there. Quite minimal use of the original vocals. Obviously, I could have used the full vocal, but I didn't. And it builds up towards that part of the track, and then you carry on. So, yeah, quite a different energy to the track compared to the original. Much more of a set tool. I had a vision for it sort of being that way, and you can see the way I've executed it by, you know, making sure everything sort of the way I've approached dynamics, the way I've approached sort of saturating the track, and the groove I've used is sort of really towards those sort of moments. And I think that's why it's worked so well, because I've had the idea for the track, I've taken it in a different direction, and because the idea was solid and I was able to execute it. I would always recommend, as I said at the start, if you're going to do a remix like this, make sure, you know, you have those set ideas at the start. Don't approach remixing randomly. Don't just take a vocal necessarily and blare it on your track, unless, well, sometimes that can work, but I find it's much better if you go into it knowing what you want to create and create something unique. And then obviously start thinking about how you process your mix. Your mix can be, you know, how you want it to sound. So I definitely have more technical mixes where things sound a lot cleaner, a bit more dynamic, a bit more in your face. And, you know, that's a stylistic choice. And for this one, it kind of works how it is. And it was a tough one to get right. So, you know, it's all about making sure you've got the right vibe. And yeah, you can see, you know, minimal parts. All I've done is use the pad in a few ways. I've used all sort of Ableton features. I've used in the beats, some transients. I've used sort of step sequences to chop them up. And yeah, that's sort of like the heart of sampling with house music. You know, that's how they used to do in the old days, and it's sort of homage to that as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. If you like the track, obviously, remember you can grab it off of my SoundCloud. I'll leave a link for it. And yeah, if you want to ask me any questions about sort of the technical aspects, maybe how to approach sort of mixing, etc. Considering obviously it's a bit more of a personal approach, but sort of what the philosophy behind it, maybe how we sort of write bass lines, process bass lines, all of that good stuff, do drop me a comment or feel free to drop me a message over on Instagram. Yeah, thanks for watching if you made it this far. And obviously, if you did, yeah, I really appreciate you subscribing and checking me out. And yeah, stay tuned for more videos.